Yeah, I see the meeting is being recorded. Okay, so let me share my screen and we will get started. We have a significant amount of time, but let's see, live streaming, okay. Got it. Here we go. The moderators will be looking at the chat. Is that correct?
Yeah.
If there's any questions that people have, they can put it in the chat or they can raise their hand and I will, if the moderators can help.
Yeah, that's right.
Okay, great, excellent. All right, everybody. So, yes, thank you for the wonderful introduction. So let's get started here with backchaining and looking at what backchaining is. My computer may have a little lag, it looks like. A little lag. There we go. Okay, so backchaining is something that is a technique, and we're going to practice this technique today in this workshop. So everybody will have a chance to get some experience with it. So if you find that it is useful for you in your own life or useful for your work, I hope that it's something you can take away from this next hour that this next hour of my presentation. So it's a drilling technique. It's something that's used often in classrooms for language instruction. And the benefits of it are that it supports people to develop clear pronunciation, particularly of difficult sound groups. So things like fricatives or syllable stress is also supported in backchaining. But pronouncing fricatives or pronouncing final consonants is also something that is supported with backchaining. And as you can tell from the name, backchaining, it's something that we do with pronunciation starting from the back of the word to the front of the word, which is different. Most people, when they teach pronunciation, they often just repeat the word over and over and over, and or repeat it slowly or break it down into syllables, but always from the front. And the reason that we do backchaining is because it allows focus and repetition of the final sounds in words. And one thing that is often difficult for Vietnamese speakers who are learning English is the pronunciation of final consonants. And so backchaining is a really effective technique with final consonant pronunciation because it stresses the end sound and the learner has a chance to speak that sound in the drill 3, 4, 5, sometimes 5 times, depending on the actual word, how long the word is, or how many parts or how many sounds there are in the word. Okay. So in terms of the concept of backchaining, it doesn't necessarily come from linguistics or anything like that. There probably is a body of literature in that field, but particularly it comes from psychology and cognitive development, looking at how our brains work and how we retain information. Or another way to think of it is like how people learn. So if folks are interested, you can look into some additional reading here, additional resources that I've cited. You can take a note of that. Okay, and as I already mentioned, so as I already mentioned, just to reiterate, final consonant sounds, consonant clusters, and fricatives are 3 things that we can overcome to have clear pronunciation of these through backchaining. Okay, so there's a wide range of people who are in this workshop today. And so I know for some people, this will be definitely very basic and review. For some people, this will be new ideas. So depending on where you are in the spectrum of that, please be patient for the entire group so we all have a common understanding. So the 3 areas that I find and that most people know who are Vietnamese speakers who are learning English, 3 areas that are difficult in pronunciation are final consonants consonant clusters and fricatives. So let's look at what those are just so that everyone's on the same page. So final consonants, if we look at final consonants are words that very clearly end in a consonant sound. So here are just examples. Okay. Retreat, the sound of the T at the end, foreign, the sound of the N at the end, especially not just the N, but the GN. And then hand, the sound of the D at the end, clap, the sound of the P at the end. Sounds very simple. You know, I think if you are fluent or practiced in speaking English, this may seem really basic, but for people who are learning English and don't yet have the practice of speaking the final consonant, it is a big problem. Something that I notice with a lot of my students who have been studying English for more than 10 years, still struggle with pronouncing final consonant sounds. Okay, and consonant clusters. So what are those? So if you look at these example words, if you look at these example words here, we can identify some consonant clusters in these words. So we have the ST, so consonant, right? More than one together, consonant cluster, the ST, the NG, the TR, right? The TH, right? So these kinds of parts of the word often are challenges for pronunciation as well, often pronunciation challenges. So with backchaining, what backchaining does is it breaks up the words so that as learners, they will be able to hear, and also see the parts of the word the parts of the word broken down into different sound parts, and the consonant clusters are stressed as we backchain. So that's something we'll see in a moment here as we practice. So the consonant clusters get stressed, and so it helps the learner to hear the consonant cluster, because one common mistake that people make is that they break up the consonant cluster sound into two independent sounds, right? They try to pronounce the S and the T as two sounds, but in fact, the consonant cluster just has one unique sound, right? So instead of the adium, which I hear some people say stadium, it's st, right? But that's something that becomes clear in the practice of backchaining. Okay, so fricatives. So this is the last benefit, clear pronunciation of fricatives. So what are fricatives? Fricatives. Let me hit my button. There we go. Fricatives. So fricatives are sounds, right? Sounds that we make where we have to push air out of our mouth, right? Push air past our vocal cords out of our mouth, usually through some sort of like small constricted shape in our mouth. The small constricted shape. And the reason they're called fricatives is because the friction of the air that comes out of our mouth produces the sound, right? So there's two types of fricatives, the voiced and unvoiced. I provided this chart here for everyone's convenience, so that you can, if you're unfamiliar with fricatives, this is a great resource to have. If you're familiar with them, then this is excellent review. So you have voiced and unvoiced. And the difference is that when you have voiced fricatives, the vowel sound is often longer or greater, right? We hear it longer. We hear it kind of like pulled out a little bit more with voiced fricatives compared to unvoiced. So that's just something to note as a general rule to support learning of pronunciation. Doesn't have anything to do with backchaining, but it's just something helpful to know that fricatives that are voiced, the vowel sounds are stretched out. They're a little bit longer than the sound of the vowel. with unvoiced. So what's the difference of voiced and unvoiced fricatives, right? So what's the difference there? Well, let's look at the examples to see if we can figure it out ourselves. So just take a look here at the voiced examples. You can probably say these out loud to yourself. I think everyone is muted, so it's okay. You can say it out loud to yourself. It will not disturb anybody. And then you can say the unvoiced fricatives to yourself. I'll give everyone a minute to do that. Reason I suggest you do that is that you can try to think for yourself to see if you can determine the difference between voiced and unvoiced fricatives. Okay, so if we listen to these, right, the voiced ones, let's listen. They're them, vote, vision, zoo, right? Them, vote, vision, zoo, right? And the unvoiced, thin, face, she, so, he. Okay. So I don't know if you could hear the difference. Let me say it again. Them, vote, vision, zoo. And then the unvoiced. Thin, face, she, so, he. So some of you probably can notice the difference. There are almost 100 people listening in right now. And I imagine there are a handful of people who can hear the difference. In the Zoom, you can use the reactions button to raise your hand if you would like to share with the group what the difference is between voiced and unvoiced fricatives. There's 92 people in this presentation. I imagine there will be at least one person who would be willing to share. What is the difference between voiced and unvoiced when we hear them? I can say it again. Them, vote, vision, zoo. Those are the voiced. And then the unvoiced. Thin, face, she, so, he. So it has something to do, obviously, with the sound of the frictive. So in this case, TH, right, is the frictive. The TH sound is the frictive. There's a voiced version and there's an unvoiced version. Them and thin. Them and thin. Right? So the difference, what is the difference? Ah, I see. Someone put in the chat. Let's see. Saren, vibrating in the voice or the throat. Yes. Okay. Very good. Very good. Yeah. So that's a great way to say it. That at the voice, there's the sound of like a vibration, right? Them and thin. Another, yep, very good. Something in your mouth vibrates. Yeah, with the voice, right? Them, voice, vision, zoo, right? I hope that on your ends, you are saying these words out loud because it makes it much more clear for your understanding. Yes, thank you. And sorry, your name got cut off in the Zoom. I can only see this as Strenuan. But unvoiced, yeah, you use air. Use air. The unvoiced is just air coming out, right? There's no vibration, right? There's no vocalization in your vocal cords. There's no vocalization in your throat. The vocalization in your throat creates the voiced sound. The unvoiced is just air. There's no vibration. There's no vocalization. So again, let's listen. Them and thin, right? Just the unvoiced is just air coming out. Just use air to make the sound. Very good. So face, she, so, he. Excellent. So now all of us in this presentation have at least a baseline understanding of final consonant, consonant cluster, and fricatives. Okay, so these three elements are addressed in backchaining. These three challenges are addressed in backchaining. These are common challenges for Vietnamese speakers of English in pronunciation. Okay. Oops. I gotta clear those annotations. There we go. All right. So with speaking a new language or learning a new language, many of you already know that a lot of it is not just knowing new words, right? It's not just understanding the grammar. It's not just being able to put the letters together on a piece of paper and read them, but also with speaking, it's not just a mental exercise or a mental activity, but it's also a physical one. Like speaking a language is also very physical because as we all know, people often say when you're speaking in a language that is not the one that is your mother tongue or one that you're fluent in, your mouth gets really tired. Well, your brain gets tired too, but your mouth and sometimes your cheek, your face also gets tired. That's because it's a very physical experience speaking. And different languages require different muscles in our mouth and our throat. Um, and so back chaining gives our mouth the opportunity to do practice. So just like when you go to the gym or if do any kind of exercise, yoga, running, push-ups, um, weightlifting, anything physical like that. The more you do it, you have to do repetition to build up the strength and the muscle memory. So the same idea with speaking is building up the muscle memory in our mouth and the proper shape of our mouth. So back chaining gives the mouth that practice through repetition. Again, it's a drilling practice. So the repetition is the key piece there. Okay. Finally, so here, let's finally, to break the suspense, here's an example. Let's look at that word, which you probably have already been looking at as I've been talking. Aroma, right? That's the word, right? The word aroma. So the different examples, if we front chain or if we back chain, right? Front chaining is the most common. It's been shown to not be as effective in pronunciation practice as back chaining, although it seems to be the one that most people do and seems to be the one that most people are familiar with. So front chaining basically means you start from the beginning to the end, right? We just start from the beginning to the end. So we would just say, right? You would teach it like this. You say, so you say the word is aroma. Then you say, aroma, right? You break it up, aroma, right? And then back chaining, we start from the back and then we teach it moving from the back to the front with the sounds. So if you're doing back chaining, we would say something like ma, roma, aroma, right? And what this does, it allows the pronunciation and the practice, the repetition to happen with the end sound, the ending sound, rather than from the beginning sound. And that it creates a little bit of more disjuncture or something that's unpredicted for our brain. Because sometimes, particularly for people who have been studying a language or English, for example, for a long time, but have not had the opportunity to experience and get feedback on clear pronunciation or accurate pronunciation, then we develop habits where we start to pronounce words in a way that actually is not accurate, but it becomes our habit, right? And so to break the habit, it requires introducing something to that student that their brain or their mental process is not familiar with, right? So, and every time we try to break a habit of ours, whether it's like with language learning or any habit in your life, it's really difficult to break a habit if what we experience is the same pattern, right? So you have to break the pattern. And so with back chaining, it helps to break that pattern. It helps in our mind to, and for the learner in their mind, to reapproach words that they have continually pronounced incorrectly. Oh, I see some messages in the chat. So just take a moment. I'm taking a moment to look at the chat because I don't want to miss any questions here. So we have from Saren, are you using this backchaining and teaching reading, correct? Yes. So backchaining can be used in teaching reading and speaking. And or speaking, yeah. It works with both. And then Dong, sorry, it seems to be more challenging for it could be more challenging for elementary students, but it may not, it really depends. I actually don't think the drilling practice is that challenging for elementary students. It might actually be easier for elementary students because they are more open to new ideas. I've tried to use this technique with various ages, and I find that it's something that is unfamiliar to students, and so they often don't want to try it. And so the challenge is getting people to buy into the practice, and that'll really be effective for them. Backward reading activities, very good. It's like building sentences. Is that right, Hien Tong? Yeah, exactly. That's wonderful. That is a great use of it too. I don't use it very much for reading in that sense, more for pronunciation. Um, and then Seren had a question, when using backchain, do you use the IPA phonetic symbols? I typically don't. In this example, I'm doing it here for the presentation, but we'll have a practice during this workshop so that everybody can kind of practice breaking up words into a backchain sequence. And in that sense, in that exercise, you'll see that I am not using the phonetic symbols. Okay. And with the students, like when I'm teaching students, I don't usually show the phonetic symbols here like I'm showing in the presentation. I just show the word, the actual word. Excellent questions from the group. Okay, I'm just going to clear the screen and then let's go to the next. So let's go on and get involved in this example here. So in addition to clear pronunciation of consonant clusters and final consonants and fricatives, it also supports proper proper syllable stress when we do back chaining. Okay. And let's look at this example here with the word infrastructure. So you'll see that I'm not using any sort of phonetics here. It's just I'm using only the actual, structure of the word as it is spelled. And so if the word is infrastructure, here in this word, we can see a couple of interesting features. So we have consonant clusters, right? There's this STR, right? There's these three consonants together. That's a consonant cluster. Here's another consonant cluster, CT. Here's another consonant cluster, FR, right? That produce sounds. So these consonant clusters have unique sounds. So we don't pronounce the consonants independently, but together they make a unique sound. So FR, FR, STR, STR, CT, right? Oh, excuse me. Where's my eraser? CT is not a consonant cluster. Why? Because it's at a break of a syllable break. Syllable break. So when you see two consonants together, at a syllable break, it is not a consonant cluster. Okay, so let me repeat that. You can see two consonants together at a syllable break, it is not a consonant cluster. Okay, so how does this work? It is pretty simple. We go from the back to the front. So let me go ahead and type it out here again because I want to point out something. As we do this, I want to point out something. Okay, so we go from back to front. So it'd simply just be, so if you were teaching this, you would break it up and you would say structure, infrastructure, right? There's another way there's not just one way that you can backchain a word. Sometimes you can break up a word in 2 or 3 different ways. It just kind of depends on you as an instructor and what you see is the most useful kind of arrangement for your students. And so here, we are breaking it up at the syllable, the syllable break. Here you'll see there's a syllable break here, but I chose not to break it up. But you can also do that. So if I'm teaching this, how would I do it? I would not actually write it like this as I'm showing in the example in this presentation, but I will show you in a second. Let me get I'm just checking the chat. So when we teach this, usually what happens is I just have the word like this as I have typed out, and then I would underline the part that we're pronouncing or practicing. So it's a chur. And then if I wanted to do structure after that, I would do this part structure. And if I wanted to do, so this one I'm going to say differently. I'll say structure so that I can emphasize the syllable stress right here. So then I would say structure, and then the whole thing infrastructure, right? And then depending on the group, if there's any need, we could also say infrastructure to reinforce the syllable stress, right? So it'd be chur, do it again. So it'd be chur, structure, infrastructure, infrastructure, right? So I just underline the parts of the word that we are pronouncing. And so the students can also visually see how the pronunciation is built. And the second part right here, the second part, this ending part right here, where there was infrastructure, that's just to reinforce the syllable stress, reinforce the syllable stress. And so I see that Soren had made a comment or a question. It's good to use this technique, but it takes some time. So when you're using it, it does take some time, but it actually goes by quicker than you would think once the class or the learners are familiar with it. Once they're familiar with it, because once they're familiar with it, they kind of know what to expect with the drill. But it takes a minute to get students or the class to buy in to understand it. Yeah. So backchaining is really good for longer words. That's correct. Really good for longer words or where there are any common pronunciation errors with final consonant, fricatives, or consonant clusters. Whoops. Okay, here we go. Okay, so here is just the breakdown of the second way where you can emphasize the syllable stress between infra here, right? All right. So this is an opportunity for everybody in the group to practice so that you have a feeling that you really grasp and understand the backchaining practice, the drilling technique. So it's something that you can do when you teach, if you're teaching pronunciation to other people, or it's something you can do for yourself if you're practicing on your own. So there are the words here on the left: snatch, flight, splash, president, and strawberry. So if we want to backchain it, this is something that if you have paper, a notebook in front of you, or some paper, it'd be really good to get that in front of you so you can practice this. So what you're gonna do here, CC stands for consonant cluster. FC stands for final consonant. F stands for fricative. And SS stands for syllable stress, right? Let's see, I don't think I need to write that out. So I'll repeat it. CC, consonant cluster. FC, final consonant. F, fricative. SS, syllable stress. For some reason I always want to say syllable stress. And then over here in the back chaining column, this is how you would break it down. So what I mean by that is you would write out, you would write out something like this, right? So what you would write out would look like the last line. Right? Write it like that to show the breaks and where you would introduce the different sounds, how you would do it. Okay. In fact, this is not what I show students, but in terms of showing other practitioners for our own notes, right? So if we were going to write this out, we would write it out as structure, whoops, structure, and then infrastructure. And then if you wanted to, which I often do prefer to do, is reinforce the syllabus, the syllable stress, infra, and then infrastructure. Right? That would be the sequence for the back chaining, starting from the back to the front. Okay, so this is what we are looking for when we're completing the column on the right-hand side, right? This is what we're looking for in the back chaining sequence. Okay, so let me clear the page here. Question in the chat. Okay, excellent, Sarah, and you're very quick. So I'm going to give folks a few minutes now that I've explained how this table works: consonant cluster, final consonants, fricatives, and syllable stress. So what you want to do is you want to identify, are there consonant clusters? Let's do the first one together. I see that Soren gave us some ideas for snatch. So, whoops. Yes, there are. So SN, right? That's a consonant cluster in this word. Is there another consonant cluster? Yeah, the CH. Very good. The CH, right? Oh, I wrote too big. Jeez. Very good. We have the SN and the CH. And then are there any final consonants in this? Any final consonant sounds? So this ends with a consonant, right? So there is a final consonant sound. There is a final consonant sound. But we don't want to forget about that T. Okay, because the TCH sound is different than the CH sound. The CH is this ch, and then TCH is hard to pronounce. Ch, ch. Fricatives, any fricatives in this? So when we say fricatives, are there any sounds that we produce by pushing air out of our mouth? So you would know that if you hold a piece of paper in front of your mouth and you say the word, and then if the paper moves, you know that the air is coming out. So in the chat, yes, we do have the fricative sound of S. Because it would make the S sound. You know, you can feel air come out of your mouth. S. Snatch. Very good. And any syllables? Just one, right? Just one syllable. So no syllable stress happening here. Okay, so let's see. How do we backchain this? How do we backchain this? Well, we start from the end. So the final sound, the final sound, ch, right? And then the next sound, natch, ch, natch, snatch. Whoop. Ch, natch, snatch. Okay. Okay, so for flight, splash, president, and strawberry, I'll give folks a minute to, you can send it over in the chat for flights. So take a minute, identify consonant cluster, final consonant, fricatives, and any syllable stress. Send it over in the chat. I'll take a look. I'll give folks a few minutes. If you don't want to send it over in the chat, try to practice it on your own, and then you can check it with what we're doing in the workshop here. So I'll give it, let me get my timer. I'll give it 1 minute for us to look at, for you all to look at the word flight. Okay. So I see we have a couple of ideas here. Okay, so let's look at this. We got consonant cluster FL. That's correct. That's correct. Final consonant, that's FL. And then, sorry, consonant cluster FL. And final consonant identified T. Very good. And then frictive here in the word flight. Flight. I see that the suggestion was the T and the F. Flight. So in this case, the fricative, there's no fricative because T in itself, if we had TH for the pronunciation of that does produce air out of your mouth, but T itself doesn't. T is just is not a fricative. And F for F in this case, flight, flight. It is just a brief, it's a brief burst of air. It's not a continual stream of air out of your mouth. So F would not be a fricative in this case. And then syllable. We do not have any syllables here, just one, so nothing there. And then we got light, flight. Very good. Yeah, light, flight. I'm going to type it out so it's clear instead of my handwriting. Light, and then flight. And then if we want to, if we want to emphasize the consonant cluster, the FL consonant cluster, we would go fl to say it again, and then flight. So light, flight, flight. All right. So for splash, what are your ideas for splash? And if folks have already moved ahead and looked at splash, president, and strawberry, go ahead and send it over in the chat, and then we'll look at this together. Frictive, let me see. Question, frictive is the first sound of the word, not necessarily the first sound. Fricative can be in the middle of the word as well, or at the end of the word. Fricative doesn't have to be at the beginning. It can be in the middle or at the end as well. It's just whether or not the sound is produced by a continuous stream of air coming out of your mouth, like a small opening in your mouth. Yeah, so face, correct. Face is, but let's look at you see how we identified, whoa, oh no. Let's get back. Oh no, hit the wrong button. Okay. Um, so yes, correct. F is in face is a frictive, but you see how in the word flight, the beginning sound is not just F. The beginning sound is the consonant cluster FL. So it's not flight it's not like flight where we separate out the F and the L sound, flight, but it's a consonant cluster. So it's one sound, fl, connected. So fl is different than f. So for face is a fricative, but because the F and the L are together as a consonant cluster, it's a new sound, which is not a fricative. Okay, so for splash, let's see. It looks like the suggestion is that SH is the consonant cluster. Wait, is that right? SP. Let me see. Sorry, can you clarify, Saren? Uh, what your SH, your Z, your SH, your LA, and your splash is? So for here, consonant cluster, yes, we do see a consonant cluster. We do see a consonant cluster, right? Spl, SPL, three consonants together. And then final consonant, is there a final consonant sound? Yes, because there's a final consonant here. The sh sound. Yeah, fricative in this case. Yeah, there's a sh fricative. And then syllable, splash, it's just one syllable, so no. Okay, so it looks like Saren gave us a breakdown for back chaining. But it looks like there's a Z. I'm not sure what the Z is for, if you want to clarify in the chat. So we have another person suggestion, S splash splash. S splash splash. Okay, so I see the breakdown there. So what we wanted, so consonant cluster is important because consonant cluster is one sound. When we introduce it, we always want to introduce those two consonants together as one sound. So it's the final sound is sh. We don't want to separate it out. We don't want to separate it out. And we want to start from the back to the front. Back to the front. So sh. Right? Sh. And the next is splash. Because SP goes to sh lash splash. Sh lash splash. Okay. And if we want to emphasize the consonant cluster here, we could continue and just say spla and then splash. Whoa. Right. So it'd be sh lash splash spla splash. Okay. So on this side right here on the left, I can show you how it would look. If I was teaching it, I would have the word on the board. I would not write out what we're writing out on the right side. I would just have the word and say, okay, sh, lash, splash, and then spla, splash. Right? So all the students or all the learners see is over here. What is on the left? Just see this part. The word and then the parts of the word that we're pronouncing in that particular order. Sh, lash, splash, spla, splash. Right. So the breakdown on the right side is just for the purpose of the workshop because we are learning how. Okay, so president. So let's take a look at presidents and strawberry. And these are our last two examples. The question, why don't we just spell it splash? So spl is a consonant cluster, yes. Why lash and not ash? Okay. So as I said earlier, or let me answer Soren's question first. Why don't we just spell it spla ash? Um, why don't we just spell it spla ash? So the question is, why don't we just go like this? Spla plus ash, right? And then the other question was why lash? Why do we do lash and not just ash? Okay, so I'll answer the second one first. It's a quick answer. So as I said before, when we are doing back chaining, we have choices that we can make. The reason I prefer to do lash instead of ash is because the the jump from the sound ash to lash is not very difficult for most people. And so I just combine it all as one, just lash. Does that make sense? Because the reason we break down the sounds, you think about, okay, why are you breaking it down? The purpose is to provide clarity where there is difficulty with pronunciation. And most people do not have difficulty pronouncing lash compared to ash. It's a very easy jump, right? So that's why I just combine it as lash. So there's one less step in the back chain. Because if we broke it down between ash and lash, as Farshid had suggested or asked about, then it adds an extra step. And then the question about why don't we just spell it spla ash? You could, but that would just be using the method of front chaining, right? Because you say, okay, this word is splash, spla ash, splash. If the group is, if this is an easy word for the learners, then you can just do that. The purpose of doing back chaining is with words that are more difficult. And correct, SPL is one sound. SPL is one sound. It is a consonant cluster, SPLA. Okay, great questions, folks. So let's look at our last two examples here. So we're going through these examples so you have a sense of how you might use back chaining, how it works, if it's something that's useful for you. And president. So the question is president. You know, when we think about these words, we don't need to have the students necessarily identify the consonant cluster, the final consonant, the fricative, or the syllabus stress. We could. It depends on the group that you're working with and the purpose of the lesson. If you're just using backchaining for pronunciation, then I would just show the word and then do the lines, right? So for example, president. So for example, if we were just using it for pronunciation, I would say president. In this case, when you hear me say the word president, it ends with the T sound, right? So I want to make sure that they say that, t, right? So I'd say to the class, t, and then I would say ent, the NT, the consonant cluster sound, right? Ent, ent, but it ends with a T, very clear. A lot of people drop the T sound. That's why I add it in the back chain. So t, ent, dent, vident, president, right? And then and then president. So the last two, president, is just to emphasize the proper syllable stress. So let's take a look. Yes, we got, yes, very good. The T, and then I would add in the NT and then the dent. So T, so T, ent, dent, student, president. Yeah, very good. Very good, Hien. And when we focus on this, what we're pronouncing is a pronunciation, right? We're not going to pronounce the letter. If you want, I would say, yes, it ends with the letter T, but the sound is T. It ends with T, and then ent, dent, dident, president, president. So Theron says, when I teach students, I just can I just break down the consonant cluster and word structure. Can you give me examples, Saren? And when you say, yes, you identify consonant cluster, that's very important because we want students to know that that is one sound, right? Because it's not two different consonant sounds that we say next to each other, but it's a blended sound. So that's true. And then when you say word structure, what do you mean by word structure? Structure, Saren. Oh, like that, like spla, the consonant cluster, and ash, spla, ash. Hmm. Yeah, that helps with spelling as well for young learners. Yeah. So backchaining, is a good technique. It isn't something that you need to do all the time when we teach pronunciation. The point with backchaining is it's particularly useful for longer words and for particularly for longer words. And when we hear our learners are struggling with certain sounds in certain words, we can use backchaining as an additional technique to support them to hear the particular sound that they are not pronouncing correctly. Right? It's definitely a tool that helps us refine our pronunciation. I find it very useful for helping people to break bad habits around pronunciation, particularly people who have been studying English and speaking English, but using the wrong pronunciation because they have not had the opportunity to hear it, the correct pronunciation, or have anybody tell them, oh, hey, actually, that sound isn't quite right. It's hard to hear, hard to understand. So I find it particularly useful to break bad habits as well. Yes, we could turn backtuning into a game as well. Yeah, great suggestion from Hyun Tong. So I think we can use backtraining for guessing words activity. Yep. So let's look at strawberry, our last example here, just to get one more practice. Oh, I'm sorry. I did see in the chat, someone broke down, let's see. Oh, no, very good. Yeah. Farshid, thank you for your suggestion for the backchaining. Great practice. So just for our learning, in this workshop, the consonant cluster here, you probably identified the consonant cluster here, right? The PR is definitely a consonant cluster. And then we also have another consonant cluster, NT, right? And then final consonant in this case, yeah, final consonant, it ends in a T, right? President. And then we do want to say that it ends in a T, but there is a consonant cluster that nt, int. This is just so I would not explain all of this to the students. This is just in our workshop useful for us as we are looking at the words and the sounds and the pronunciation and the phonological order of the word. Okay, fricative. Yes, in this case, so let's listen. President, didn't, right? That Z sound. President, which is produced with the SI right here. President. Syllables, yes, there are syllables. There are multiple syllables. So then the question is, which part of the word is stressed? President. Let me write this out. So president. There's those three, syllables. So the question is the syllable stress, the Z, the syllable stress, or the dent, the syllable stress? President. If you look at how I backchained it, the syllable stress is right here in the last part, right? That's the reason I do the last part when I do this. So I say t, ent, dent, zident, president. And the last two here is to emphasize the proper syllable stress. President, right? So the that's the sound. This is not the spelling, obviously, but that's the sound. The pres is the stress on the proper syllable stress. Okay, and then we backchained it. Very good. T. This is how I would do it. Ent, dent, student, and then president. And then syllable stress President. The last one, strawberry. It's a couple of syllables, a longer word. Strawberry. Right. So here we have some consonant clusters. Again, the str sound, right? The stress sound and the re. Wait, re is not a consonant cluster because y is not a consonant. Okay, question for you all. Is the WB, is that a consonant cluster? Strawberry, the WB, is that a consonant cluster? WB, There's two consonants next to each other. But if we listen to the word strawberry, right, strawberry, we hear both the W sound and the B sound as separate, distinct, right? So this is not a consonant cluster. Why? Well, because the word strawberry, if we look at the syllable stress, right? The syllable stress, the break and the syllable, the break for the syllable is right between those two consonants. And when there is a break for a syllable between two consonants, it is not a consonant cluster because you're pronouncing both of the consonant sounds independently as a result of the syllable. Right? So strawberry. So WB is not a consonant cluster, but the STR, the stra, right, that sound stra from STR is a consonant cluster. So Saren gave us an example of the breakdown. Let's take a look. Oh, so if you were doing front chaining, oh wait, let's see. I'm trying to guess what you wrote in the chat here. You wrote stra and then, oh yeah, okay, so the next box, you put the RY as the end sound. So that is the ending sound, but it's not a consonant, right? The Y is a vowel sound. So it doesn't end with a final consonant, although that is the ending sound. It is not a final consonant sound. So there's actually no final consonant here. And then is there a fricative? Whoops. Is there a fricative? Is there a fricative for strawberry? Strawberry. I would say no, because even though it starts with an S, it's starting with the consonant cluster stra, which is a different if it was just a word that started with S, like sound, right? Sound. The S sound is very distinct. It's standalone, but this word strawberry starts with the consonant cluster stra, which is not exactly. So no. Whoa, geez. So no and no. So the breakdown for this word we would see as starting from the back, right? Berry. Berry is a pretty easy word for everyone to pronounce. So berry, and then rawberry, and then strawberry, right? And then if we want to emphasize the proper syllable stress, straw, and then strawberry. Okay. So let's look over here. Now let me erase the president stuff. Let's look over here. So if I was teaching this, I would have the word on the board, strawberry, and I would say and then have the class would say they'd repeat after me, berry, the class repeats berry, then I say rawberry, the class repeats rawberry, strawberry, the class repeats strawberry, and I say straw, and they say straw, I say strawberry, and they would say strawberry, okay? So as you can see, when we do back chaining, it gives a lot of emphasis on words that have final consonants. So the final consonant sound is repeated, in this case, for this example, for splash, 1, 2, 3, 4 times, right? So it helps to ingrain the need to pronounce those final consonant sounds. So question, it says, is there something online where we can cross-check this backchain, maybe dictionaries? That's a really good question. I haven't found I haven't found like a source where you can just put a word in and it, um, pops out the backchain. So in terms of like a short answer to that, I would say no. And unfortunately, like in dictionaries don't do backchaining. But you can find, so you can't find a resource where you just put a word in and it'll produce the backchain for you, but you can find resources online that give you the guidelines for backchaining. And there isn't like there isn't just like one strict method for doing backchaining. You want to think about like, well, what is the pronunciation challenge of the group or of the person I'm working with, or what's my pronunciation challenge? And then my presentation here is focusing on addressing final consonant pronunciation, consonant cluster, and fricatives, and also on some level proper syllable stress. And so depending on what your focus is with your group or your students, then you could backchain slightly differently. So for example, if syllable stress isn't difficult, you wouldn't have to do the last two steps. You would just do berry, raw berry, strawberry, done, right? But I find that syllable stress is often something that people who are not native English speakers struggle with, to know, well, where is the emphasis in the word? So I add that in at the end, which is different. Like when in the past, I would just teach syllable stress independent of backchaining. And sometimes it's harder to hear the syllable stress when you're only focusing on, say, front chaining and pronouncing the word from the front to the end. So like strawberry, to break it up, say strawberry, right? Sometimes we use the clapping technique like strawberry, the emphasis where you clap, and so people can hear a pattern. But I find with backchaining, it creates like a rhythm in the words that's often really helpful. All right, folks, let me clear the screen. So as I use this mostly for pronunciation, I do know that other folks and other practitioners use it for backchaining sentences for reading, right? And I believe one of the participants had mentioned in the chat that they do that too. Might be more of you who do it with reading and sentence structure. So just wanted to note that that is possible. I don't do it very much and don't have much practice with that. I use it mostly for pronunciation, but the same idea goes where you start from the end of a sentence. So for example, I'm studying the present progressive, right? And you would say, the teacher would say progressive, the student repeats progressive, then you say the present progressive, and then you continue to back build the sentence. This here, I would break it down even more and say studying the present progressive, and then say I'm studying the present progressive, right? All right. So that's the end of my presentation on backchaining. I hope you all had a good opportunity to think and practice through some of those words on the table that we worked on together. If there is any questions that you all have, I think maybe we have a few minutes here for question and answer. I know some people have asked questions through the presentation, but now is a good time if you have any final thoughts, comments, or questions, or anything that maybe you've used backchaining and you want to share a story or some information that may be useful for the rest of the group. Let's see. Can I have one? I'm not sure the question. Can I have one? So if you have a class with multiple multiple ability levels in one class, how do you apply this? So you have multiple ability levels. One thing that I do in my multiple ability levels is that the students who have higher ability, I often ask them to backchain the word, and then I give them the opportunity to lead the class in the pronunciation practice. That's one technique that I use. And then in our table that we worked on, where we identified consonant cluster, fricative, final consonant, and syllable stress. If there are higher level students, I might have them do that. And then the other students who are not quite there yet, I wouldn't have them think about that. I would just have them focus on their pronunciation. Just really depends on the group. And then Saren says, I used to, let's see, I used to train a house. Okay, so yeah, so Saren said you have had some experience, used to be with back chaining, with prior training on that. That's great. I think Saren is working in Siem Reap in Thailand. No, Cambodia. Okay, host, thank you. Any other final questions? Yes, Siem Reap, Cambodia. Thank you, Saren. Or comments or anything you would like to share that maybe you have done that is similar to back chaining, or suggestions of how you might use it in your own classroom or your own learning. I'm also constantly learning. So with nearly 100 people in the room, I am excited for any sharing as well that you might have. You can send over in the chat. Thank you for the comment, Zhan Yuan, Mei Jin. So to the host, the Viet Tessel host and the moderator, it's my understanding that participants at the conference will be able to reach out to any presenters if they have questions or further resources or connections they'd like to make. Is that correct?
Yeah, thank you a lot, Miss Chilan. We would like to say our big thanks to your great presentation. It's so fruitful and informative. And if participants you have any questions, you may give for Miss Lan, or if you don't have any question anymore, we would like to say big thanks, and please give the heart and the big claps to our speaker. And thank you very much for present here and to have so great presentation about the pronunciation and the back training in this for our activities in learning and teaching. Thank you very much. And we wish to meet you Sunday in the near future and have direct applause for you. Thank you very much, the presenter and the participants in the workshop today. Thank you very much.
Yes, thank you everybody for your interest. I hope one day to cross paths with you all, and I'm sure we will have a chance to chat more and share more from our experiences.
Yeah, so moderator to Mr. Tanle, would you like to have the group photo?
That's fine.
Yeah, sure.
Is it possible to do a group photo?
Yeah, sure. Pretty sure.
So like a screen snapshot. Like we need to make sure
Everyone-
everybody has this up on their camera so we can. All right, so I think that's enough. That's good enough.
So can you count?
All right, thank you.
Yeah. Thank you very much,
All right, thank you very much and goodbye.
Miss Lan, and thank you.
Okay, goodbye everybody.
Yeah, more than 100 in this room. Wonderful. Wonderful afternoon. Thank you very much.
All right, excellent. Thank you, everybody.
Bye.
Have a great time this weekend at the rest of the workshops and presentations.
Yeah, sure. Thank you very much. Yeah, see you.